So, hello, David. My name is Mark Jeffrey. Wait, fucking up the show already. Welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is David Johnston of Morpheus. Hello, David. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, dude. So, how about that Bitcoin?
Wow.
We just hit
happy.
88. Yeah, we just hit
Happy
88K.
all-time high for those that celebrate, right?
I mean, unbelievable, right? It feels like I sort of always thought that there would be like sort of a moment like this where it just sort of took off like just insanely. And I think we're still in just sort of the beginning stages of it, because the FOMO will kick in sort of the super wealthy and the countries and the nation states. And I think we're just sort of in the beginning days of that. Hope I'm right, obviously, from a bags.
I mean, it feels pretty good, right? You know, having sort of tried to orange pill everybody back in 2012. It's nice validation that, you know, it really did sort of have a long-term future, and this crazy idea of open source money and programmable money would be the future. It seems like that's becoming the consensus view, right? And with the regime change, you know, I think people are just imagining a world where we're not getting punched in the face every day by the SEC or closing our bank accounts. Like, I don't know how many of my friends have left the country, right? Or been, you know, harassed by regulators. And it's like, it's not a small number. And so you've had to be fairly brave to build in crypto, or you move to Europe or Asia. And I think a lot of those people are saying, hey, maybe I can finally come home, right? Maybe I can build in the US. Maybe I can launch a protocol. Maybe there's going to be actual guidance and like a rule book to know how to do this, right? How refreshing would that be? So I personally don't put a lot of stock in politics, and certainly, you know, politicians are not my savior, but just neutral, just like not adversarial would be a huge upgrade compared to the last 12 years, right? So.
Yeah, no, I feel like, I was talking to somebody else last night who's not in crypto, who was basically telling me she runs a business which is, you know, just like a normal world business, but even she, like as a small business owner, was basically more or less under continual attack from regulators. She just was like, I don't know when I'm going to wake up and find some new law, which is, you know, on its way to being passed, which is going to absolutely wreck my business. And the feeling of like this weight lifting off of all of us, like we it's like we've all been on the run, and, you know, there's been people shooting at us, and we just didn't realize how much it was stressing us out, you know, just in the core of our being until this happened. Right now, we all just feel like, I'm not being chased by a monster anymore, just more or less continuously. So let us pray that this all continues to go the right way. But so far, best possible timeline.
Well, and it's a lot more far-reaching than just its effect on Bitcoin or crypto prices. You know, to see the vice president-elect, you know, publicly, you know, tweeting on X, the solution is open source AI, right? Like, we were talking about that a year ago, right? And we're like, the only solution against all these centralized powers, you know, creating a monopoly around AI is to open source it. Now to, you know, see mainstream figures embracing that view, you know, certainly, you know, Peter Thiel has been saying that, as have Naval and, you know, David Sachs and a lot of the guys in Silicon Valley. But now to see that echoed, you know, in an authority figure is pretty refreshing, right? That, you know, if you have the right logical conclusion, hopefully you can advocate for it and other people come to that logical conclusion over time. So, you know, I think this is going to be a lot more far-reaching than just narrowly around crypto, but hopefully the acceleration of all these correlated technology trends.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did see something from Andreessen. So Mark Andreessen tweeted an answer. So Adam Draper asked the question, where's the punk rock in the startup world right now? 12 years ago, it was Bitcoin, right? Yeah. And Mark Andreessen tweeted back, censorship-free AI. So he's clearly got the vibe, right? So nice little segue. Let's talk a little bit about Morpheus. And for those who don't know, just sort of bring us up to speed. What is Morpheus?
So the easiest way to think about Morpheus is it's a platform for smart agents in the same way that Ethereum is a platform for smart contracts, right?
Yep.
It's about giving builders, and the crazy thing is like this has taken off the last few weeks. It's giving builders of agents, right? It's giving those builders of agents access to capital tools, right? If they want to raise funding, with the fair launch mechanism, it's giving them access to compute so they can run their smart agents. It's giving them access to all the coding tools, right? To bridge the world between Python heavy AI land and, JavaScript and Solidity heavy, crypto land, right? Connecting those two together. So that's what it's really all about. Capital, code, and compute to enable builders to create these smart agents. Smart agents just being a term for an AI that's connected to a wallet, right? It's able to take on-chain actions and actually use smart contracts, right? And so that's the difference between a dumb AI that somebody like OpenAI has, right? Which can only give you information, but can't take action, right? So a smart agent can actually take action because it's connected to your wallet. You can approve it to send transactions or use DeFi or any number of use cases.
Yeah, so I guess the difference would be with something like ChatGPT. It's just sort of sitting there waiting for somebody to poke it in the head and ask it a question, right? It's like the Guardian of Forever. It's like, a question. I have waited forever for a question, right? From the old Star Trek episode. Whereas agents, they're more like C-3PO, where they're sort of in the world and they're just sort of watching things and they have agency. That's why they're agents. So they can self-ask a question, self-motivate, leap into action, based on some activity going on out there or not, just on their own, right? So that's kind of the difference. So it's sort of like robots. They're just made of software, right? So, yes.
Well, and they can actually respond to what's going on, right? So people have released agents on Morpheus that read the news, right? And can respond about what's happening. Or you could give it, a price oracle, right? And say, oh, I want to trade, Ethereum when it hits this price, right? There's swapping agents, like you want to go between different currencies. Great. It's connected into all of those tools. And it gives you a user interface where the person can just express themselves, tell people what they want to do, right? Tell their agent what they want to accomplish. It understands and connects them to the best smart agent that can do that task. So we're just going to see this Cambrian explosion of smart agents. We're just seeing the very tip of that right now, where people basically release this as an interface for just about any application or website or dApp or smart contract you could imagine. All of a sudden it has a human-friendly interface. And that's the big payoff for me here is how do we get to 1 billion users? We got to make the user interface easy, and this is the way to do it, right? Ilya tweeted the other day, I thought this summed up so well.
From Near.
Ilya from Near.
Oh, from Near. Okay, different Ilya. Yeah, I'm glad we clarified that. Yes.
Name collisions.
Yeah, so he's the founder of the Near blockchain, just for those who don't know.
And he put forth, I thought it very, very well, which is AI is the front end, blockchain is the back end, right? That's what we're doing. We're matching programmable intelligence with programmable code, with programmable smart contracts, with programmable money, right? So the blockchain is really the back end that's going to power all of these AI interfaces. So I thought that kind of summed it up very well.
Yeah, no, I did notice that Near had made some announcements. It looked like they were trying to basically morph the entire chain and direction of what they were doing into, I'm gonna use it as an analogy to like a BitTensor Tau kind of thing. But in general, decentralized AI, right? So where you are, where they are, where several people are headed. Is that correct? Is Near sort of full guns on that, or is that just sort of one gun?
Well, to give them full credit, right, they really started in 2017 focused on AI. You have to remember Ilya and Near. Yeah, you have to remember Ilya and Near was one of the co-authors of the Transformer paper at Google that described this entire. I did not know that. Yeah, he's one of the OGs of generative AI when he was working at Google, spun out to create a blockchain around that thesis, and has always sort of been on this drumbeat of user-owned AI, right? Which is the same thing that we're saying with, personal AI, free AI, independent AI. His user-owned AI has always been sort of something they wanted to build at Near, and then sort of the market caught up with them in 2022, 23, when this wave of generative AI hit. So I really think of him as one of the best thought leaders around all of this, right? It's Ilya on the generative side. It's Emod with what he did with all the diffusion models, right? Building stability, right?
Yeah.
That was the first big open source model for images. What Eric Voorhees is doing with Venice, like these guys are really pushing it all forward. And Morpheus is sort of just giving incentives and economic rewards and weaving together these different pieces of the tech stack. So I don't know if you saw the tweet the other day from the Morpheus account, but somebody in the community created this really cool image of the decentralized stack. And it for the first time, I thought sort of captured, that these aren't competing projects, they're complementary, right? You have BitTensor and Noose creating models. You have them running on Akash GPUs. You have Morpheus matching that with demand from somebody like Venice, who's interacting with the user, who is actually, connected to a wallet, let's say on Coinbase, who's been releasing all these great agent tools recently. I don't know if you've seen.
No, I haven't. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah. Coinbase has been really focused on agent tech the last few months, and they released this something called Agent Kit, which makes it easy to connect an agent to a Coinbase wallet, right? So not the exchange, not their custody, but the decentralized Coinbase wallet, right? And you could set up an agent and give it a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time, or authorize it for a certain application. They call these sessions, right? And they've pioneered this multi-party compute system that lets you connect those primitives into an agent, right? And so the Morpheus community has been in the middle of all of that. So just a few days ago, they extended Agent Kit to support all the open source models. So now you can connect in compute from Morpheus, the Venice API, any of the Llama models, and power these agents in a permissionless nature. So they've been big advocates for that. So big shout out to Lincoln, the developer over there, who's been doing a lot of those tweets, Brian, and all the team that's been supporting that work.
Yeah, no, that's pretty. I did not know about that. That is amazing. Hash Rate is sponsored by Ledger. With the announcement of Ledger Flex and Ledger Stacks, Ledger gives you the best security on the planet for your crypto and identity. Ledger Flex and Stacks drive an e-ink screen with the same secure chip that's in your credit card and passport, except instead of protecting the secrets of banks and governments, Ledger protects your secrets and your private keys. Ledger supports Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and more than 200 other tokens. The secure touchscreen, plus the Ledger Live app, means that whether you're buying your very first Bitcoin or doing your 2000 swap, you can do it securely and easily with your Ledger. And as always, use my link, shop.ledger.com/hashrate in the show notes to get the very best price whenever you buy a Ledger Flex or Stacks. It's going to be much larger than most people just in the AI world think, right? Because they're not really thinking about the crypto stuff. But I have to give Ryan Salkus credit for this thought. But Ryan very early on said that AI was yin to crypto's yang, and that they were really two sides of the same coin, right? And in their final manifestation, and Balaji said stuff like this also. But Ryan was the first one to sort of crystallize it in that phrase. And for me, that spoke volumes. It's not it's not pivot to AI from crypto. It's pivot to AI and crypto from crypto, right?
Yep, 100%.
That's the solution.
That's what's happening. We're seeing all these pieces come together. So. Yeah,
it's really exciting, and it's really wild to discover the next thing here. So you texted me or DM'd me this week with something I thought was pretty interesting. So you said, "Wow, AI agents just blew up this week." Figure you've been tracking Goat, Virtual, and other AI memes popping off, which I have. I've been watching the whole Terminal of Truth saga, right? So that's the one most people probably know. So. Tell us what that is and what's sort of been happening.
So, there's been this wave of, I'll call it memetic agents, right? Where somebody's connecting a meme, a social account, and powering it with a large language model, right? Mm-hmm. So the agent, right, can actually respond. So
it can tweet.
Right. So it could tweet and then respond to people that tweet at it, right? And it was funny to see Brian Armstrong tweeting at Truth Terminal, wouldn't you like an independent wallet that isn't controlled by your creator, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the reality right now is these agents are sort of like puppets right now. Whereas, it's created and maybe released by somebody, but ultimately somebody's paying a credit card bill for a subscription to ChatGPT, and that's what's powering the large language model, right? And so while these have been sort of really cool and popular experiments, the next logical step is you are going to use something like Coinbase Wallet. You're going to be able to put some more tokens in it, and the inference won't be dependent on a human, right? Because if you can stake more for inference, it doesn't stop being able to access that large language model because of some credit card going away.
Now, when you say inference, let me just interrupt you for a second there. So you stake more tokens for inference. That means compute, right? That's what you're saying, right? That's the underlying GPU. And then you, in turn, are part of a stack which includes things like Akash, which are paid in crypto. So ultimately, the AI or the agent has its own wallet and can pay for its own continued existence. And it can earn money in that wallet also to pay for its own continued existence and perhaps growth, right?
Yep.
So, okay.
That's exactly it. And just to tie it into the history of crypto, that's why Bitcoin exists today, is Satoshi figured out how the software could pay for its own hardware. And then it became persistent, and then it became independent, and then it became unstoppable, and then it became uncensorable, right? So if we want smart agents to take that same sort of journey, is you want the smart agent to be censorship resistant and permissionless, and for it to be able to act in the world, without a human paying for the hardware, right? So how does the software pay for its own hardware? Well, we have a mechanism, right? Eric Voorhees brilliantly put forward the Yellowstone paper in the Morpheus context for, hey, instead of paying a fee every time, what about staking for inference, right? What about staking for compute, right? And so the whole Morpheus compute system has been built around his idea of staking for inference. And that's what's about to go live in 7 days on November 18th.
I was going to ask you about that because I know you hadn't launched quite yet, but you're getting close. So,
right.
Okay.
So Capital's been live, coding rewards have been live. The next big piece is for compute to go live. So that, again, Morpheus is agnostic. You could be running that GPU on Akash or BitTensor or whatever network you want. But if you connect it into the Morpheus router, then it gets matched to somebody who wants to use that compute, wants to use that inference, right? And that's the part of the stack where Morpheus is sitting, is matching together these two sides of the market, right? BitTensor and Akash are providing supply to the market, right, of GPUs and compute. And then you've got all the other people like Venice that want to demand that compute. And so Morpheus as part of the stack is to match those two together, right? And that's sort of what's happening and about to go live. So I couldn't be more excited because this is sort of the step where Morpheus becomes permissionless and unstoppable. You've been able to run it locally, right? It's been on testnet for months, but now it's going to graduate to mainnet, and the rewards go live from the protocol to the people providing the compute.
So the people who are providing the compute will earn more tokens, not like more tokens, but Morpheus tokens. So
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. That's it. So, that'll unlock effectively this marketplace where, you're rewarded to provide these open source models like Llama and others, right? To give them to somebody like Venice, right? There's a ton of privacy improvements that have been made recently on the whole technology stack that really, ensure all of these prompts are private all the way down to the hardware level. So there's great groups like Fala and Hive and Foundry and SETI and Hyperbolic, like all these groups, right? Exhibits, all these groups have popped out of the ether the last year, and are ready to provide, this type of service. So I think the timing is sort of just like perfect.
The timing is really good, without a doubt. We're entering the golden age of the confluence of, the AI meets crypto meets, the hardware stack, GPU being offered for crypto, combined with Bitcoin going crazy, right? Like just all these things are coming together in this stew pot, and it probably couldn't be better. So congratulations on, I know it's been a lot of hard work to get here, and we didn't really know whether this moment was going to arrive quite, configured correctly or not, but it did. So congratulations. So Yeah, let's talk about Terminal of Truth for just a second, because
Sure.
that's been sort of interest to a lot of people. So Terminal of Truths is an agent that somebody fired up on Twitter, and it connected it into Twitter. So it can tweet, it can talk to us, we can talk to it, it can talk back. It doesn't always talk back, but sometimes it does. And if it identifies you as like an important person, like Mark Andreessen, it apparently negotiated with Andreessen for an investment, which Andreessen did supply it. I think it was like 50K or something like that. And he basically sent it via Bitcoin wallet to a wallet the Terminal of Truth, quote unquote, controlled, but not really directly.
Right.
Terminal of Truth's handlers actually had to then collect. They had access to the wallet, and they then had to actually pay for the services that Terminal of Truth wanted built. I believe it was just hosting, something like that. So it's sort of hand cranked. And what you're proposing and what your system will do is not hand cranked. It is direct ownership of that wallet. Yes.
Yep, that's exactly it. Truth Terminal has been a really cool, pilot, and Andreessen giving the $50,000 as a donation, sort of brought everybody's attention to it, like what's going on here. But yeah, the way it becomes real is you've got a personal smart agent. You want it to go and do things on your behalf. Now all of a sudden it can interact with the outside world, right, via X, right? And, there was a bunch of Morpheus communities that were at the first X hackathon as they were just opening the API the last few weeks, right? And it's like, how do we take these pieces from Coinbase and from X and from Morpheus and plug them all in together and have something real that's persistent that, will be around 6 months from a year from now, right? And taking all of these actions. So it's been interesting to watch the evolution. With Truth Terminal, it looks like they're pivoting towards it being like a service. You could ask it about different coins. It can analyze them. It can give you advice. Almost think of it like an API or a microservice that, is serving around intelligence, for Web3, right? And I think we're going to see a ton of those, right? You could spin up a microservice that could give you advice or recommendations for just about anything if you properly trained the large language model, right? Or even just give it enough context and connect it in all these data feeds, right? So I think we're going to see a proliferation of those. And you've got 600 million people on X. It's a pretty good distribution channel, right, for connecting to real world users. And think about the next step. X is applying for money transmission licenses. They've got 35 out of 50, right, in the US. Clearly, they're going to add a wallet, right? And when that happens, you're going to have another 500 million people have a Web3 wallet. Add that to the existing 500 million people, you got your first billion users, right? So it's really moving quickly.
So, the BitTensor guys hate me when I say this, but too bad. I'm going to say it anyway. So even though I really love what they're doing, and I personally own a bunch of Tau tokens and have staked them and blah, 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 I think they have a really shitty front door, as in they don't have a front door. So it's really hard for the consumer to see, taste, hear, feel what they're doing, right? So, and they'll answer back like, well, we got ChatGPT like things, but then when you go to them, the user interfaces are pretty ratty and made for geeks. It's talking about how many tokens it's processing. It's not consumer friendly the way ChatGPT is. And I think one of the reasons why OpenAI achieves such astronomical valuation is because the public could use an AI for the first time, and we're pretty shocked by how good the results were, right? And so that led to OpenAI having this monstrous valuation, whereas BitTensor is not. All their subnets are things like protein folding, which even though that's super cool, it's not like Joe 386 pack ain't going to use that, right? That's not so he doesn't care about protein folding. He cares about, making memes in Midjourney, right? So my question to you is, what do you think, sort of at scale when this succeeds, what do you think Morpheus's consumer front door looks like? Is it like sort of a list or a directory of agents that you can interact with? Like, how do you see that? Or are you thinking about that?
That's one of the things that most inspired me when I first read the Morpheus paper is, the Anons had really sort of taken this view that you needed to knit together the entire tech stack. And like what you're saying is BitTensor is right at the bottom of the tech stack, right? They're creating the models, right? But then you need somebody to host them, like Akash. You need somebody like Morpheus to match them up with users. But Venice is a pretty damn good interface. Like I use it every day, right?
I
And
do
they've
too.
really gone viral, right? I see it all over Twitter. I see people creating the images everywhere, right? And they just added characters today, which is fun to play with, right? They created all these different personas. Yeah. Like, this is, a character trained on a certain persona. And
So like a
so
voice, like a character voice, like
yeah, like, here's one that knows all about, doing a D&D game, right? And he
okay,
can run the D&D game for you, or, here is, the crypto expert, or they've got a bunch of hilarious ones like the Karen, and it's like all these different versions. But, a lot of people have played with these, but it's sort of, they keep shipping these great features, right? It didn't stop with text, then it was images, then it was code, now they've got characters, right? And so I think a lot of the interface for most people for like Morpheus and Akash and BitTensor will be the Venices of the world, right? It's people that build that last mile. And the cool thing is it's not left to a couple of companies, right? The rewards actually extend into the actual builders, creating the smart agents, creating these user end applications, right? So 24% of all the rewards in the Morpheus context go to those builders actually creating the end application, right? And that's actually the next step after compute, right? If you think about it logically, you needed capital first, and then you needed all the coding tools, and then you needed compute to host everything that got built, and then you could build the user interfaces. And so that'll be the next phase right after compute goes live, is these builder rewards, which I'm extremely excited about, because I feel what you're saying, which has been with Linux, okay, it dominates the backend, right? 95% of all servers are using Linux, but where's the user-facing interface, right? It hasn't penetrated, the average users. The same with like Android, right? It's dominant among smartphones, but then it sort of got wrapped by Google and others. And so what I'm excited for is to go that last mile, where billions of people can use the actual technology at the end user level. So I think that's what we're finally getting to.
If I want to set up an agent in your system when it's all full live and everything's launched, I come to your website and I stake some more tokens, and I think it's 10 tokens required to stake. Is that correct, or is it more?
There's not really a minimum. Venice has set up their system so that if you have one more token, they'll give you a pro account, right? You can think of that as a really low hanging fruit as far as I think they charge like $45 a year for a pro account, and Morpheus tokens are trading for around 23. So might as well buy a more token. But ultimately what they want their users to do is stake more towards their inference, right? They're covering their biggest cost, which is the GPUs and running the models, right? So for them, Morpheus is a way of incentivizing their users to cover their main cost and sort of be involved in the success of the network. So that's really smart. But I think most people will interact it that way, right? Through an application, but it'll be largely developers. Like, who's the audience for Ethereum? It's developers.
Yeah, it's
right?
largely
Who's
developers.
the audience for Morpheus? It's also developers, right? People that want to build those smart agents. And they can do that actually right now. If they go to mor.org, you can download from GitHub the latest version, and it has the reference agents, it has all the connections to the wallet. You can run it locally. You can build your own agent, test it out locally. And when Builder Rewards go live, what you're going to be able to do is basically deploy it to something equivalent to the App Store, right? I built my agent. I tested it locally. I'm shipping it. Now it runs on all the Morpheus compute rails. And I want people to be able to discover it, pay for it, and for me to monetize this thing, right? And that's why people pay 30% of their income to Apple or Google, because they don't want to handle discovery and payments and infrastructure.
Yeah, it's sort of worth it. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. And in the Morpheus context, there's no 30%, right? So they're just adding it to this decentralized registry. It becomes discoverable. And so somebody asks for a swapping agent, it already knows to direct them. Here's the top one, has the best rank, uses these smart contracts, right? So that's the goal, is for that Apple level of user interface to get to extend that to all of these builders.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. So going back to your token for a second. So right now, so there's there's 42 million more tokens total that are possible, just like Bitcoin's 21 million. But there's only a million more tokens in circulation right now. And I don't know if you've pre-generated all of them or pre-mined all of them, or whether you're sort of doing it like Bitcoin where they're coming out. I think you guys had an ITO, so I think there's some portion of it outside of that million that's not in circulation but exists. Is that correct?
Zero pre-mined.
Oh,
zero
okay.
given the team. Entirely fair
really?
launch. Yep.
Okay.
100%. All built in public. So in February 8th, when the fair launch started, anybody could provide staked ETH, and the yield was contributed to the protocol, right? And so it's non-custodial. Morpheus never holds anybody's money. People can withdraw their staked ETH after 7 days whenever they want, right? So they're only contributing that yield to the protocol and liquidity. And that's the trick. There's no treasury. There's no committee. There's no bureaucracy. It's all automated into the protocol and liquidity, which is just buying tokens out of Uniswap, right? It's creating demand for the tokens. So that's how the whole system has bootstrapped. So you could provide capital or you could provide code. There have been over 300 code contributors since you and I first talked all over the world, like half of them anonymous. I don't even know who they are, right? And if their code got merged, they got rewarded with Morpheus tokens, right? And the next thing will be compute, and then will be builders. So of those 3.5 million tokens that exist, they're either sitting in a bucket waiting to be activated, right, when compute or builders go live, or they've been earned by people, and people have staked them and locked them up for the future. So since we first talked, the community built this staking mechanism where you could say, hey, I'm a diamond hands. I'm going to hold this for the next 4 years. And the protocol gives you more pro rata power in the emissions than if you just provided staked ETH or code, but you withdraw them day one, right? And it's been incredible. We're talking 80% plus of the coders have locked up on average for 5 years. Like the community, the hardcore dedication. I mean, you're talking like me and Eric and like all these guys that have been in crypto for a long time. I wish I could have done that with my Bitcoin, right, in 2012. But those tools didn't exist back then. Now they do, right? And so, the same on the capital side. I think the average is like 2 or 3 years now that somebody has staked. So they're providing that staked ETH. They're earning more, but they haven't claimed them that. And so that's the gap you see between the claimed and the unclaimed, right? They've been earned, but they're locked up for years and years. So Morpheus has become extremely scarce. There aren't a lot of sellers because there's no team tokens, there's no pre-mine, there's no VCs. The only ones that exist are the ones that got earned. And the people earning them are super radical about it.
So to be super clear, so the 1 million in circulation, that includes everything you just discussed? It does. Yeah. Okay. So they just, the other 41 million just don't exist yet. They haven't been emitted. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm totally clear on that. That's pretty amazing. So, because I know your market cap right now of the circulating tokens is only 27 million, which is, that feels kind of like an extraordinary opportunity. Not financial advice, but I am saying that based on sort of the trend lines and what you're saying, it does feel like an extraordinary opportunity. Especially if you're looking at, sort of your comparables are Tau, right? And, some other things, but Tau's the big one. And their market cap of circulating is, I think, 4 billion. And they have 21 million coins, of which roughly 7 million are circulating right now. So, it's a decent comparable in most ways. So that's pretty amazing.
Well, what I really like about the tokenomics is you do have a hard cap, right? So they'll never be more than 42 million. But you also have burning built into the protocol and liquidity. A third of the tokens bought off the market every week are burned. So it's going to be something less. It's going to be something less than 42 million, right? You have this cool mechanism where a third of the protocol and liquidity goes into a 16-year lock. And so at the end of the emissions curve, there's a pool for the next block reward for the next 16 years.
Okay.
So even though it's a hard cap, it'll never run out of resources, right? As long as they're being locked up and burned and put back into liquidity, right? You get deeper liquidity, you get more scarcity, and you have a recurring block reward in sort of a really nice balance. So, that is both easy to explain. The 42 million. Okay, don't worry about anything else. Oh, but if you go deeper, you realize, it's going to be less than that because of the burning. And then if you go really deep, you go like, oh, and they have this novel way of refreshing the block reward every 16 years. Okay, like these rewards are going to be here for hundreds of years as it goes down that curve, right? So I think they modeled it out in the white paper for the first 256 years. So like, it's a long-term project, right? But I like that approach because if you're going to build a decentralized system, you want it to be as distributed as possible, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that was good about Bitcoin is it didn't kick out all the rewards to Satoshi and a couple other miners the first year, the first 2 years, right? People had a fair opportunity to hear about it, to learn about it, to try it out, right? To build businesses and get involved in mining over many years, right? And so Morpheus is very, very similar.
Okay, so one question I have about your model. So you stake more tokens, MOR tokens again, for compute. So normally, you're basically staking them, and then your system is buying compute from SETI.ai and Akash and people like that, and they are charging you monthly, right? So there's actual money or crypto, but there is a continual cost every month. How does the economics work where I stake more tokens and you are bleeding cash every month? Like, I don't get how that squares up.
So compare it really to the block reward in Bitcoin, right? How do miners, get paid in Bitcoin, but they have real electricity costs and real hardware costs? Well, somebody is sitting there and saying they're bullish on the token, right? Okay. And that they're willing to pay, for electricity or hardware. Maybe they have a bunch of GPUs already and they can earn this token. Okay. Maybe they'll hold it, maybe they'll sell it, but that block reward provides the bootstrapping to the network, right? And you don't have to, stake for inference. You can just hold Morpheus tokens and use them as a payment mechanism, right? You can directly pay a compute provider just like you would cash, but here in this utility token, right, in this commodity, right? Yep. And use that as a way to pay. And you don't have to worry about the protocol and the staking or any of that, right? You just want cheap inference, great. You can use the router in that way too, right? Morpheus is permissionless. But, the economics are really interesting. I've run a couple of the models, a bunch of the communities done analysis. And if you were to hold about $1 million of more and stake it, depending on the price, it appears you'd get about $890,000 a year of inference, right? So people staking are sort of bullish on the long-term value of the protocol. They have a recurring need to access inference. Like there's somebody like a Venice, like they're going to be here 2 years from now. They might as well hold the token. They might as well let some of the block reward subsidize their usage, right? So that's really the trade-off is people are creating more scarcity because they're buying the token and they're staking, right? They're not going to be sold as long as they're staked. So they're adding to the scarcity of the network, and the reward is getting part of that block reward, right? Passed towards your usage of inference. So that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. So if I stake my more token just as a mere mortal, user, I do earn some more tokens, the emissions. Is that correct?
You have access to that amount of the inference. So let's make it super simple. You owned 1% of the tokens. You'd get access to up to 1% of the inference every day. So there's a daily budget, right? 3,000 more are going to be emitted for compute. You'd get access to, those 30 more every day. Great. You can use that to pay for your inference to one of these compute providers.
I see. Okay. So basically that's my yield, if you will. My yield is paid in inference.
Yeah.
It'd be the great
exactly.
way. Ongoing, which that's not nothing. That's ongoing value that that normally you'd pay real money for. So it makes total sense. Yeah.
And if you think about it from like a yield perspective, that 890,000 on $1 million held, it's like an 89% APY, right? Yeah. And so that's the way to think about the usage. But it matters to you if you're a developer. It matters to you if you're somebody that's going to use the compute. Now, somebody else may just stake their more towards a builder and say, hey, I want to go, support them and direct some of those block emissions and, earn tokens of what they're building, right? So you can have different types of people staking more for different users, right? The user is staking them so they can consume the compute. The provider is staking them so they can provide the compute. The builders, right, staking them to show, their alignment with the network, and people staking towards them, right? So you're going to have a lot of ways to stake more.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about something you said right at the beginning of the pod, which was there is a way in your universe for new agent builders to raise money.
Yep.
So take me through how. So let's say I want to build. I have an idea for something. How do I enter your system? I guess it's sort of like a GoFundMe or something. Like how does it work?
So going back to the fair launch that Morpheus did, it was sort of brilliant, right? It was a low risk way to support a project. If you're going to hold Ethereum anyway, right, you might as well stake it and point the yield towards Morpheus. And people have done that to the tune of like 60,000 stake deep. Like we're talking,
it was
150. Enormous. Yeah, it's a lot, and it's still going on, right?
Yeah.
It's not a one-time thing. It's this automated recurring revenue. So if you're a builder and you say, well, yeah, I don't want to deal with VCs. I don't want to do a company. I just want to spin up this agent, let people stake towards it. Great. The smart contracts that Morpheus used have been released as More 20, basically a standard for doing a fair launch. So anybody that wants to use the dashboards and the smart contracts, they don't have to rebuild all that from scratch. Like these contracts have already supported $1 billion worth of fair launches. They're used by AO Arweave, right? Who has put like 400 million through the smart contracts, and Morpheus itself, and Noun Space, and all these other groups, right? You don't need any permission, right? It's all open source. And so that's a really cool way to access a fair launch without having to spend 6 months of coding and a bunch of audits and all the rest. Here's just a tool, right? Here's a template. You can literally fill out a dashboard with no code and say, I want my token to be called this, and there'll be this many of them, and I want to run it for 30 days, right? Instead of 16 years, whatever, right? And you can pump out one of these new coins. And that's part of what's happened with these agents. They're all starting to release their own meme coin. But think about, and that's been fun, and it's sort of like this speculative bubble. But think about a sustainable version of that, where like you just want to build one of these microservices and you need enough more to pay for the inference. We'll do a More 20. The community can support it. You can buy some more. Now all of a sudden your service is stood up, persistent, and keeps running, right? Because it doesn't just run out of funds, and it can use this staking for inference model, right? So it dovetails really interestingly with what the community's already built, just extends it for everybody else. And so to give credit, there's a guy in the community, Kevin, who's proposing a Morpheus accelerator, and he's just day in and day out helping onboard people that want to do these fair launches or want to use the compute in the ecosystem. So it's like, go for it.
Like a M Combinator. Yeah.
I like that. More Combinator, M Combinator, more accelerator.
Yeah, more Combinator.
I'm thinking,
less.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's getting to the point where the community could probably use like its own builders event, similar to DevCon.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way.
I think it because we've been doing all these decentralized AI days and summits around all the conferences, but I think probably next March, for the first time in Austin, it'll come together as more builders and bring together all parts of the community, the builders, the compute providers, the coders, and the people providing capital, right? Get them all together and see what gets launched. But, the speed at which this is moving is just incredible.
Yeah, so let me just recapitulate what you just said, and I'll try to dumb it down for my own brain. So it's basically you created these smart contracts for your own launch of Morpheus and the More tokens, and it basically was, and the deal was stake your ETH in our liquidity so that we have protocol-owned liquidity. I assume on like Uniswap or no, wait, you're on Arbitrum. Oh, it is on Uniswap. Okay, so but
on Arbitrum, on Uniswap, on Aerodrome now, it's getting everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. So, but you are on the Arbitrum chain, correct? Is that, okay, that's what I thought. So basically contribute your ETH to our protocol-owned liquidity, and you can get your ETH back, but while you're staking it, you earn more MOR token emissions, and so that's basically how you boot up. So that's the investment, really. It's liquidity. It's not like you give me 100K. It's my token gets liquidity, but that's extremely important. And obviously, I will have some of my own tokens theoretically as the project holder, and I can probably apportion whatever I want to myself. So I think there should be some team tokens. So if I want to do that, I can, and then then basically I can use that. I can exchange that for ETH or whatever to pay for some of the non-compute or non-inference parts of my like paying developers or something like that. I can use that money for that potentially. So okay, so that's pretty. So now there's created this whole little world of self-booting up agent teams, and you've now reached the point where it may be interesting to have like a demo day, because I really think that would drive a lot of interest from sort of the normies, because they can't really. It's very sort of ethereal, and it sounds like it's not specific, right? It sounds cool, but what is it? What is it really, right? And when you can actually see the agents, like when people saw Truth Terminal, they were like, oh, I know what agents are. It's like that thing. Except instead of Twitter, it's like maybe doing other things, right? So once they can touch it and taste it and feel it, it becomes a lot more solid. And I think people will have a moment, much like ChatGPT and OpenAI experienced, where they suddenly evaluate what you're doing quite a bit differently. So I think that's a great idea.
It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, because all these tools are coming together so quickly. And I think capital is a big part of it, and usually one that people underestimate, right? What made Ethereum were people doing ICOs, right?
Yes.
And as much as people belittle ICOs these days, by my tracking, 40 billion was invested and 400 billion of value has come out over time. Yes. So if you had really participated in Ethereum and many of the early ICOs and held, you actually probably did pretty well, right?
Yeah, there were some you did extremely well. Even like Phantom basically went from 2 million in valuation to like $1 billion.
Well, and what's happened in the last few years is the opposite, right? It's been captured by these pre-sales and these VCs getting most of the tokens, and then it goes out to the market, and people don't really have a chance at the early stages of capital formation. But the thing that retail was turned off by was the rugs, right? All these bad actors that flowed in after the good actors were successful and said, oh, do my ICO. And a lot of those were negative or predatory. And so to have sort of like this fair launch reinvention where it can't be rugged because the team never held your token, right?
Yes.
Okay, they can take the yield and maybe the project works or it doesn't, but you can always get your ETH back, right? Yeah. That idea that my principal is never at risk and I'm still exposed to the upside of the success of ETH and the rest of the industry, that's really powerful. So I think it's time for like a relaunch where you have these fair launch ethics, but it's protecting people at the same time.
That's a really, really interesting point. I agree with you. I don't feel the ICOs. I mean, I know there was a lot of rugs and a lot of bad things, but the core idea and the core mechanism also did a lot of good. And it reminded me of, people during the dot-com bubble. The internet was like nothing. It was bullshit. Nobody was ever going to use it. And then all of a sudden everybody was going to use it. And $7 trillion worth of VC cash flowed into the sector. And all kinds of like really stupid, dumb ideas. That was like, a lot of it, but also some really great ideas like Amazon, like Google, right? Like there were some really great gems that came out of that bubble. And then after the dot-com bubble burst, the conventional wisdom for about 5 or 6 years was the consumer internet was bullshit. It was a mirage where the real serious money is to be made in intranets and enterprise. Right? You couldn't raise money for a consumer internet company for roughly 5 years. Like it was just not possible. When in fact, actually, that was the biggest sector that gave returns later down the road. So if you could somehow live through that desert or start something in there, you did extremely well. LinkedIn was born in that desert. Facebook was born in that desert. The Twitter was born in that desert, right? So there's a lot of things. Those are the biggest companies. Netflix was born pre-desert, but had to live through the desert. So, right. So I feel like ICOs are sort of the same thing. There's a lot of bad shit, but there was also a core of something new and very good. And I think you've actually added the extra protections to keep people from being rugged by sort of rethinking the mechanism just a little bit. It's a little nudge, but it's a significant nudge. You can't lose your Ethereum because you get it back. It just delayed getting it back, but it's still yours. Yeah.
Yep. No, nobody else was ever holding it on your behalf, right? So you've ripped out the middleman from
Yeah.
the equation. And to your point about the early days of the web, if you had looked at the number of internet users, you would have never been discouraged, because
Yes.
despite the financial spike up and down, the number of users never stopped growing, right? And
Yeah.
that's what's
No,
happened in crypto. If you ignore the price chart and just look at the adoption, it just keeps doubling, right? And like we talked
yes.
about earlier, we're not far from going from 500 million users to a billion, right? And that's when it finally flips in people's minds. It goes from nobody uses it to everybody uses it, is after you get to a billion or two users, right? And then it's really gone mainstream. So we're very close, because in an exponential, that last part of the curve is really quick, right? It took us
Yeah.
15 years to get here to today's adoption, but it's only going to take 3 or 4 to get to the majority of the world at this point, right? Because all the platforms and rails and infrastructure has been built now, and AI is giving us an interface that's easy for the average person to use, the same way that the search engine was that for the web, right?
Yeah.
As long as you had to type in IP addresses and navigate directories, it was never going to be mainstream. But as soon as you could just tell it what you wanted, give me a sports website, and it popped up the best result on the internet, then it was magic, right? Then it was for everybody, right? And so we're getting to that same point. I feel like that when I use Venice, I've stopped using Google. I've stopped using ChatGPT. I don't need them. It's connected to the internet. If it doesn't have the answer, it goes and finds me the answer, right?
Yeah.
And so, and none of the ads and none of the nonsense and none of the, propaganda, just the real answer, right? So it really reminds me of those early days of the web.
Yeah, the way I remember it was it was Yahoo. It wasn't really a search engine. It was just a page with a bunch of links on it that went on for a long ways, and then they started organizing it alphabetically and then by topic. But it wasn't really there wasn't really a search bar for a long while. I mean, they did eventually add one, but that was sort of how it started off. And I know that because I was at Delphi Internet at the time, and I showed Sean Connery the internet for the very first time, because Delphi had a office on the 20th Century Fox lot, and Connery's new film production company was right next door to us. So he wandered in one day. He was like, "So, what do you do here, Delphi Internet?" Right, and so I I was sort of like, "Okay, I'll play. Come on over, Mr. Connery. I'll show you the internet." So that was how there's a whole story to that, which I won't tell here, but it was a pretty interesting experience. So okay, so we're starting to run out of time here, so I want to ask you 2 quick questions before we go. First one is AI regulation. So now hopefully it's going to be a lot more favorable than what it might have been. But are you in any way worried that decentralized AI will be outlawed? And how do you think about that? And how do you sort of position yourself so that no matter the outcome, you do all right?
There's effectively 2 ways to think about it. The new regime has said very explicitly that they will repeal the executive order that Biden passed last year that you and I first talked about was so crazy.
Yes.
Right? KYC for data centers, and we're going to regulate how many servers you can use. We're going to block non-US people. So hopefully they make good on their word, and that's withdrawn. But it feels like we're getting to this inflection point where whether they do or not, Morpheus doesn't care, right? Any more than Bitcoin cares where the hash power is provided from, right? And you can run these models anywhere, right? And the open source, since we first talked, the open source is actually caught up and in some cases surpassed the proprietary models, right? Ever since Llama 3.1, especially 4 or 5B, it's right there with ChatGPT 4, right? It is a gold standard model. And so credit to Meta, they've pushed that forward, and we're just seeing that trend continue, right? Llama 4, by all reports is going to be insane, right? And Elon has open sourced Grok. And so for each model he releases, he open sources the last one, right? And they've got the largest GPU cluster ever assembled, right? I was lucky enough to go to the open house that XAI held, and Elon was there answering questions from the audience for like an hour and a half, explaining their GPU cluster and all this incredible stuff that they were building. And, it was cool to see him again confirm, yes, I'm going to keep open sourcing all of this. And NVIDIA, it just open sourced one of their big models, and they're the ones providing the hardware, right? So it feels like the pendulum has really swung back, right? From everybody's running closed models to most of the big players now are headed. Even the other day, I saw, AlphaFold 3 from DeepMind and Google just got open sourced. So even the scientific tools are entering the open source realm. So I think the more that trend continues and accelerates, the better the outcomes are going to be. Now, Europe has still been pretty negative, and Meta has said they're not releasing their models there. But I don't know what that really means.
I mean, how do you
open source?
No, nobody can move it over the internet. It's outlawed.
if anything, though, that'll make decentralized AI more attractive, because Europeans that get blocked from using OpenAI or Llama are just going to go to Morpheus. They're just going to go to Akash. They're just going to be using Venice. And the same thing in China. China has banned OpenAI, not open source, but the company OpenAI and their API in China. Yeah. So if you're a Chinese developer right now, you can't access.
Why the hell would China do that? Like, I mean, don't they want to learn?
They did the same thing to Google. They did the same thing to Facebook. They do the same thing to everyone.
They did it to Bitcoin for a little while. That's true. So it's just new tech. And they're like, no.
They tried, but you can't stop Bitcoin. And you can't stop Morpheus. And you can't stop all these decentralized AI tools. So if anything, ironically, it'll make them more powerful because it'll be the only option. Because they won't be able to access the centralized version. The only thing they're going to be able to do is access the permissionless version, right? Just
like
if they
Obi-Wan
wanted to move,
Kenobi.
Yeah. There's no stopping it, right? And so just like they wanted to move capital for the Chinese, a lot of them, their only option was crypto the last 10 years.
Yes.
Which just made crypto more powerful, right?
Yes,
so ironically, whether it's friendly and we have smooth sailing in the US or other jurisdictions, or it's unfriendly, either one benefits sort of the decentralization.
Yeah, fully agree with all of that. So, okay, now sort of a fun question, and this is one I asked Eric, and I know you saw that. I know you saw the Voorhees pod. So, so we were discussing, AGI and conscious machines. There's sort of one camp of the universe here, which says LLMs are proceeding at such pace that they will one day, very soon, be smart as us and conscious and have souls and silicon, right? And other people are like, no, that's bullshit. It's it's a party trick, and it's a really good party trick. And we can, it's incredible the productivity gains that we're going to get from that party trick. But ultimately, down at its core, it's a party trick. Where do you fall in this camp? Do you think LLMs are one day headed towards consciousness or not?
Well, it's interesting. I have a bit of a unique view, which is that yes, they're actually very powerful.
Yeah.
But we absolutely want humans and individual free will to be at the center of that power, right? And this is one of the first things that Eric Voorhees observed when I was telling him about Morpheus in September of last year. He's like, oh, thanks to encryption, the AI is never going to be able to reverse engineer the private key, right? I don't care how smart it gets. It's not going to break the laws of thermodynamics. There's not enough compute in the universe, right?
Yes.
To reverse engineer, certainly post-quantum cryptography, right? And it's like, oh, okay. So if you want humans, and I do, I want humans to be at the heart of AI. I want individuals to have the freedom to express their intent, their wishes, their goals, their tasks, right? And for the AI to help them achieve that, right? And we're just at the beginning of that process, but by rooting it in this Morpheus tech stack, that's what we're achieving, right? The Web3 credential is the perfect thing for an individual to prove mathematically that it's them asking for this thing to be accomplished, for their AI to go and do most of it and then get approved at the end. That's the flow that we want. And that's what worked for the web, right? It's not that Google did everything for you. It still ultimately was the user saying, I want to go here. Google gave you a bunch of options and you ultimately clicked on the link and say, yep, that's where I want to go.
Yes.
So I don't think humans as oracles is going away. I don't buy this nonsense that, AI is going to be fully autonomous. I don't want it to be fully autonomous, because if it's fully autonomous, what that really means is somebody early in the stage planted a certain set of values and principles and goals, and it's run off trying to achieve those, right? But I think that type of untethered AI could be really negative, and it certainly won't be aligned with the interests of people, right? The best information system in the world is the free market. People don't understand this. when you're buying and selling things, you're not just participating in the economy, you're sending a signal about what you care about what you want to exist in the world, the products you want to use, the places you want to go, the house you want to live in. Like, these are information expressions that get then understood by the market and say, oh, we need to build more houses over here, right? We need more food over there. And so the best societies in the world are ones where you can freely express your desires and do it economically, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we want for AI, right? I want AI responding to billions of signals from billions of humans. That's how I think you get really good outcomes. The reverse is you've got a couple of big companies or a couple of big governments that are superimposing their desires above that of their people, right? So, and I'm very optimistic. I think we're on the golden path. I think we're headed in the right direction. It really feels like we're entering a techno renaissance, right? To use a phrase from Beth Bezos the other day, right? So I think we're headed there. We've made a lot of progress this last year. Keep pushing. I think we're on the edge of something really incredible.
Yeah, I believe that we're at the moment living the best possible timeline. That's what I call it. So we're on the same page. So we're out of time, my friend. But thank you for once again coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Very exciting developments over at Morpheus. So thank you once again. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This is Hash Rate. See you all next time.